Rambam today is in Hilchos Nizkei Mamon, Perik Dalet Halacha Dalet. We're going to discuss that Rambam, which on the surface reads like a Medrash Pliya. When I grew up, my father, Allah Shalom, enjoyed very much bringing Medrash Pliya from. There was a Sefer Medrash Pliya. So this Rambam would fit very well into that at first sight. There is a correction that has to be made in the Rambam, and the Rambam himself makes in response to a question, and the response to the question asked to him. But even after his answer, it still needs a beer. So let's read the original text as we have it in our Rambam. Rambam says, "Ha'meiser shtereisov, ha'meiser behemta." I'm sorry. L'shem echinam, oile neisasacha, oile seicha, oile sheil. Nichnesu tachas habaylam. If somebody gives his animal, somebody takes his animal, it gives it over to a shamer to watch. Whether the shamer is on the level of a shemer chinam, who's only chayiv in pshia, a neisasacha, a seicher, chayiv in gneva aveda, or a sheil who's chayiv in einsim, they go in place of the bailam. That's the words. Nichnesu tachas habaylam. Imhizika hashem chayiv. And if it damaged, you took the place of the bailam. Bamed var mamurim zog the Rambam. When is this said? This man shleishamru klal, when they were just negligent. Aval im shamru shmire mu'ula karaui. They did a good job, and they watched appropriately. The yachts of Hizika Hashemrim Turim V'Abaylim Chayam. So Rambam writes here that if they watched it properly, meaning they put a gate, a iron gate behind in front of it, and this animal was very, very capable, and he dug a hole under the gate, and I guess he learned from the smugglers who smuggle things into the United States. You make tunnels. Made himself a tunnel and went under the Yatzav Hizika. So here is the Medrash Pliya. Hashemrim Pturim V'Abaylam Chayavim. The Shemrim Apata, because they did their job. The Baylam Achayiv. And then he writes, Afilu Hemisa Sa'adam, even if he killed somebody, and then he adds another line. Shamru Shmira Pchusa. Let's say they didn't put up an iron gate. A gate that would work normally, but it's not the best. It won't be blown down by a normal wind. Im Shema Chinam Hu Pater, he's Pater. Im Shema Sacha Seicha Sheil Hu Chayav. Then they're Chayav. They didn't do their job. Same Shemachinam who is part of Shemasacha Chayav. Okay, the Raiva obviously jumps on the Rambam and disagrees with him. So the Kesef Mishnah brings there that the Chachmei Lunil, they obviously were very, very scholarly people who studied the Rambam, and very often presented their questions to the Rambam. When the Chachmei Lunel asked the Rambam, what does this mean? How could they be chayiv? If they watched them properly, why are they chayiv? They did a shmir mula, they put up an iron gate. Little did they know that he learned the trick of making tunnels. Or they he was a student of Hamas. He made tunnels under to get into Israel. What's going on over there? So the Rambam said, it's a mistake. And what is supposed to be the nusach? The Rambam says, nusach in the Rambam is as follows. That if Yatzav Hizika and you did a shmir mu'ula ashem and patur. Everybody's patur. The shem patur, the bailam patur. However, lo shamru klal, they're chai. Avalim shamru shmir mu'ula karoi v'yatzazik ashem paturim afilim misas adam. It doesn't matter. Killed somebody. It doesn't make a difference. They're patur. And he's patur. Shamru shmir b'chusa, there's a difference. If he's a shem echinam, he's patur. V'abailam chayom. Im shem esacha, oisaycha, oishayel, who, meaning the shemim are chayavim. And the shem are chayav. So this at least brings it into line with some kind of a logic, but still needs explanation, which is that the Rambam in Hilchos Nizkei Mamon later, a few Perokim later, Perek Zayin Halacha Aleph, the Rambam says, Shur shekashrei ba'olav b'meiseira v'nal b'vanav kara'ui v'yatza v'hizik. So he says the following: if he's a tam, he's mishalem chatzi nezik, because a tam requires a greater shmira. Why? We don't know yet. V'im hayemuad pater. Shenema v'lo yishmerenu. Don't guard him. You didn't guard him. Im shamrei pater. V'shamar he guarded him. As long as you got him, it's okay. So what is the Rambam saying? That a muad requires a shmir b'chusa. So the shemrim, asaycher, shemesachar, sheil, they guarded a shmir b'chusa. Why are they chayavim? And why is the bailam chayavim? They should all be batter, just like a shemechinam. Shemechinam is pater because he's a shemechinam. He didn't shmir b'chusa. They also, that's all you need here, the shmir b'chusa. So this is the Lechem Mishnah's question. The Lechem Mishnah says a teretz that's again adds to the Medrash Pliya aspect, and it's talking about a keren tam, taka and a chanami, and you need shmir mu'ula. So the problem is that how can it be talking about a keren tam? The Rambam is talking about hemisa so adam. There's a question that the Achrayim ask, which the Chair is talking about kaifer. What's a misas adam kaifer? What he otherwise? What does it make misas adam or damage the person? That's all the same. And the Rambam Baskins and Perek Yud Halacha Beis that a tam does not pay kaifer. Is that going to be talking about a tam? The Achrayim give answers, and there are answers to this. I'm not necessarily satisfied with the answer, but there are answers. I would like to get into a possible approach with this based on something that I saw and analyze that. Perhaps expand it beyond and discuss it. Okay. The Gemara that we spoke about, Shmir B'chus and Shmir Mu'ula about Tam, the source of the Rambam's Halacha, is a Gemara B'Bakama Daf Mem Hey Amud Beis. In the Mishnah, it says there, Kashru ba'olav b'meiseira of a nal b'fan of karoi v'yatsa hizik echatam v'echanul chayim. In other words, Divrei Rameir holds you need shmir mu'ula for everybody. Rabbi Yehuda is the one that Rambam Paskins like and separates tam chayim and mu'ud pat. And he brings this pasuk v'lo yishmerenu ba'olav shamar huzeh. Okay, that's the Gemara. And the Gemara there goes on explaining the machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rameir, how they learn it out from Sukkah. What's kara'ui? What's shmira kara'ui? So the Gemara goes on and explains that it's correct, as long as it's not going to blow away when a wind comes. But if it, just because it can't stand in a strong wind, it's still, that's that. But a strong wind is not what we're looking for. A regular wind. And the Gemara goes on to discuss what about Shein V'Regel? Right? So he wants to that everybody can agree by Shein V'Regel, you definitely don't need. The Torah limited their shmirah. It brings psukim. We learn by Shein, it says ubir b'zdayacha ad the ovid ke'en ubir. That's to make it like you did it. Regel ad the ovid ke'en v'shilach, as if you did it. But if you did any shmirah, it's good. So if you were to try to ask me why is a muad and a shein v'regel all muadim enough with a shmir pchusa, if you learn the Gemara, it's exeris hakosuf, and that's the big discussion in the Achreinim. I mean, there's not much deer. There's not much deer there, as they say. Just an interesting meiri that's not in the meiri that the Shita Mekubetzes and Baba Kama brings in the name of meiri. He writes the reason that a tam is different because hoyel v'koil yeshlei, because it has a koil. When a tam does something, it's a koil. Is therefore you should have been careful. A muad doesn't have that. That doesn't have that. No, on the contrary, because a muad is known, so everybody has to be careful. In other words, the victim is being blamed here. It's an interesting ideology that exists today in a different way, obviously. However, let's analyze the Gzeres HaKosuf. If we want to go with the Gzeres HaKosuf. Now, we have three types of mu'adim, two types of mu'adim. You have mu'ad mitchilasei, shein v'regel, and you have sheir, keren, which becomes the mu'ad. But they all have Gzeres HaKosuf, that they're enough with a shmir pchusa. So the logic is that they're under the same heading of Gzeres HaKosuf. So we can identify a logic to the Gzeres HaKosuf. In other words, a reason and a rhyme to this concept. Perhaps we can apply it to all, and matter of fact, it's logical that it will apply to all. So, Rabbi Soloveitchik from Boston, in his Rishimas Shiurim, I saw a miyudike word that he wants to say, and he touches it into the Gemara very well, and I really liked what he was saying. He says that the Gzeres HaKosuf in Shein V'Regel, and I will extend it also to Karen, is that these mazikim, a muad, is like you're doing it. You're not chayiv because your animal is doing it. You are your action. The animal is your action, so to speak. Animals' actions are judged as you doing it. It has to be as if you did it. And that's why the Gemara uses the lashon ad ovid ke'en mavir, ad ovid ke'en v'shilach. It's as if you did it. Therefore, as long as you did something that is not you doing it, you guarded it somewhat. So then you can't associate to him this ma'aseh of Hezek. You can't say I did it. On the contrary, look what I did. I guarded it, and it would fit with Karen also, because what's the lashon of Karen? Oshamuru. As long as you did something, you did shmira. You're not you. So you didn't do anything. You can't associate the action with me. I did mine. To explain this, there's an interesting discussion. Allah is if a shiur kills a person, a muad, then the owner is chayiv to pay kaifer. Shail in the Gemara, if it's kapara or mamon, we pass in kapara. The Rambam pass in kapara, I believe. But before we get there, the pasuk doesn't say you pay kaifer. Pasuk's lashon is v'gamba all of you must. Zog the Rambam in Perik Yud Halacha Dalet of Hilchos Nizkei Mamon. Zeh shenemar b'teire v'gamba all of you must. V'yashmu lamdu shechiyuv misazu b'dei shamayim. V'nasan kaifer hanerag nischaperle. And if he gives kaifer, in other words, the simple reading of the Rambam is that there's a chiyuv misa b'dei shamayim. Kaifer takes it away. You pay it. You don't pay it. There's a chiyuv misa b'dei shamayim. That's what would seem the lashon. Now, this is really a machlekes mefarshim of Chumash. The Even Ezra in Parshas Mishpatim writes, Hine yeh zeh you must. When it says here you must, it doesn't mean he should die. There's no chiyuv misa. Lefi daiti k'moy ayin tachas ayin. It's just a metaphor for what you're chayiv. You're chayiv to pay his soul. Meaning shehu ra'ui sheyamus. Ultimately, it would have been fit, but now im lo yiten keifer nashe. Chol zabavu shehu kasav yumas lo yamus. Yumas is not yamus. There's really no misa, he says. It would have fit. It would be fit for you to have misa. But there's kaifer. And ayin tachas ayin. Doesn't mean there's a thought of taking out his guy's eye. He's mechuyev to take out his eye. This is instead of his eye. Of course, not such a concept. Yeah. The Rashbam writes, as the Rambam seems to say, the Gamba all of you must be Dei Shemai. When you eat kaifer, bottom and misim Dei Shemai. It sounds like it's a ptur. And the Rambam seems to hold like that. So Rav Soloveitchik wants to connect this to the discussion before. According to the Rambam, you did the killing. It's as if you did it. Therefore, there's a shaykh in the chiyuv misa b'dei shamayim. And that's why it makes sense that Ebenezer, it's that Shiur doing it. How could you be mechayiv misa b'dei shamayim? What you Shiur did. Therefore, it's only a tashlum. However, he brings somewhere else in Sanhedrin that Reb Chaim refused to accept such a concept, that there is a chiyuv misa b'dei shamayim on the Baal HaSher. Even though that's the mashmois of the Rishonim. And he says, no, it can't be. It just means that there should have been a chiyuv misa b'dei shamayim. Kaifer is the antidote, not because it's taking away the mitzvah. The Eibishter took away the mitzvah Shemayim with Kaifer. So if that's the case, what do you have to learn pshat in the machlekes of the Rishonim? Perhaps you can add that the machlekes Rishonim is not whether there is an actual chiyuv mitzvah Shemayim. The question is whether there would have been a chiyuv mitzvah Shemayim. Would have there ever been a chiyuv mitzvah Shemayim if not a kaifer? So according to the Rashbam and the Rambam, yes, there would have been, but the Torah replaced it. They replaced it with kaifer. Not that kaifer takes it away. Torah replaced it with kaifer. According to Rabbi Eliezer, there was never an Avmin. It just means that he did an act that, in theory, would have been, you're redeeming your Misa B'dei Shemayim, but it's not that there's an ever would have been a thought of a Misa B'dei Shemayim. It's like Ayin Tachazai. You're paying for the Misa B'dei Shemayim, but not that there would have that there was ever a thought of a Misa B'dei Shemayim actually. The only problem with such an approach is that's all good in the Even Ezra, it's good in the Rashbam and Chumash, but why would the Rambam bring it? The Rambam is a Sefer Halachos. What was he? Why is he bringing it for? Perhaps the reason the Rambam brings it is to tell us exactly this: that when you're chayiv for muad, it's if you doing it. That's why he says there would have been theoretically a Misa B'dei Shemayim, but the Torah exchanged it for kaifer. In other words, yes, it's your act. So that would put the Rambam back into that place, and the Rambam is faked. That's exactly what he's trying to do. If that's the case, then all of Muad, obviously, of Karen, which is Chayiv Misa B'dei Shemayim, which would have been Chayiv Misa B'dei Shemayim, Shem V'Regel, they're all under one heading. The reason you're potter with a Shmir Pchusa, because it's your act, and you did what I could do. I did something. I'm not me. I didn't do it. You can't tell me. You can't be meyachis to me that I did it when I did what I'm supposed to do. Okay, so now let's go back and try to. What about the shemer? There's an interesting halacha in Perik Dalet Halacha Yud, in our Perik in Halacha Yud. Shaila, what happens to stam shemer? Does a stam shemer accept nizokin on it? Is he chayiv nizokin? The Geshaila the Gemara. So the Rambam paskins yes, stam shemer accepts nizokin, unless he says clearly not. The Ravid argues. He says no, you have to be macabre nizokin. Mistam alay macabre nizokin. And the Maggid Mishnah says it's not clear in the Rambam, but the Pashtus Lashon Rambam is like the Rajva that holds that you're macabre nizokin. Okay, so why? Perhaps there's a big difference between the bailim and the shemer. The shemer is chayiv not because he's the bailim. He is a shemer. His dinei shmira require him to watch for nezukim too. It's part of his chiyuv shmira. So then in being a shemer. The bailim is not a shemer. The bailim is because he did it. Nichdesu tachas ha-bailim means he takes on the responsibility. But he is chayiv mitzat his din shmira. Okay. I want to pivot a second to the source of this Rambam, that Hashem potter abaylam chayavim by shmir pchus, and by the Shiur and everybody else you chayiv. They're chayiv. Where's this Gemara? So Gemara also there in Bab Kama. It says, and he brings all of them. And he says the halacha that if they watched it, then they're chayiv and he's part, the Shemachinam is part, hey, chidami. How's this talking about? Eat the notre. They're all part. Eat the loy notre. If he didn't watch it, Shemachinam is also chayiv. So here the Gemara institutes this. Now, but listen to the words of the Gemara. Hacha b'mayaskinon the notre shmira pchusa, l'notre shmira mu'ula, shemer chinam kol loy shmirase, hanach loy kol shmirase. Shemer chinam, the shmir is over. Shema Sachar, and the rest, their shmir didn't end. What does that do here? Why are we talking about Kol Salei Shmirasei? The main thing is that the Shema, he watched it appropriately in that. The main point is Nichnas Utachas HaBailim. He say Kol Sechiyuvam. What's Kol Shmirasei? The Lashon HaGemara is pushing us in this direction. That it's a Chiyuv Shmira. It's part of their Chiyuv Shmira. Hashem Esachas Chiyuv Shmira ends with Pshia. As long as he wasn't Pshia. The others have a Behidur Chiyuv Shmira. They like Kol Shmira, and therefore they're Chayim. So I think it's quite obvious in this Gemara that that's what's going on here. I can't tell you why it's logically makes sense, but that's what it seems to say. Okay, so if that's the case, one thing is clear. The reason Hashem Echinam is potter with Shmir Pchusa, because he's Eis Shemer. I've done my job. I'm finished. So he has no Chiv Shmir, therefore he's potter from the Hezek, because the Hezek has to connect to his Chiv Shmir. Now, listen to this. Why is the Baal potter when a Shmir Pchusa, we said? Because I did what I can do. But if you gave it to Hashem, you didn't do anything. You didn't do anything. You can't tell me you can't be miyachiz the act to me because I did not do the Pshir. No, he did it. So, even though he is potter with the Shmir Pchusa, but what can you do? But the Bailam didn't do a Shmir Pchusa, so it's not shaykh that you can't tell me I didn't do. You can't be miyachiz to me. I gave it to somebody. What he did is his business. But I didn't do. And therefore I can still be chayv. However, Shayil, Nesesach, and the Seicher, their Chiyuv Shmira requires a greater Shmira. They're not potter with a Shmir Pchusa. Even though Mitzad Hilchis Mazik, they would be potter, but Mitzad Hilchis Shemer, they're not potter. And there's a big Kiddush to say that Hilchis Shemer will chayiv you more than Hilchis Mazik, but the Teretz is, that's the Chiyuv. I'm a Chiyuv al Shemer, not al Mazik. Oh, so now the question is, if they were Shemer Shmir Mu'ula, and V'yotza V'zika, why is the Bailam potter? So originally, the original version of the Rambam may fit better according to this Mahalam. No, the answer is because then it's an Einus. Then it's already an Einus. They did a Shmir Mula and it still damaged as an Einus, and therefore Einus can't be Misyachas to the body. You're right. The Shmira part, Shmir Pchusa, still can be Misyachas to the body. It's not an Einus. But the Shmir Mula is an Einus, and it can't be Misyachas to the body. I want to give a note on this. There is a big Kiddush here. But the Achrayim also say such Kiddushim, but in different ways. I think this at least fits a lot better with the Lashenis and the Rambam and what the Rambam said. That a Shemer takes on Shmira according to his level of Shmira. That's part of his Shemer. And the Bailim are mechuyev, as we said, mitzad the mice, as if they did it. If there's an einus, you can't miyachas it to them. That I think it would work. Okay, sei gesund, Hatzlacha Rab.